At 10 a.m., a billionaire's fate changed forever, when a janitor discovered an incredible mistake. Jack Thompson pushed his mop across the sleek marble floors of the CEO's office, the rhythmic sound blending with the bustling chaos of downtown Chicago. At 38, Jack had traded the fast-paced tech world for a janitor's uniform, a move that felt like a choice until it became a necessity. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and his wife juggled 2 jobs, leaving him as the primary caregiver for their daughter, Emily. The laughter from their lunchtime chats was a bright contrast to the shadows stretching across their lives. But today was different. Today held the weight of the world in an unexpected revelation. As he leaned against the wall to rest a moment, Jack's eyes flicked to the documents scattered across the desk. Curiosity pulled him closer, the elegant script almost mocking him with its importance. Then he saw it. The figures on the paper were wrong, glaringly so. Glaringly disastrous. His heart raced, a storm of emotions crashing within him. Disbelief, anger, fear. Here he stood, a mere janitor, staring down the volatile mistakes of a Leviathan business, knowing that this one slip could cost millions. He hesitated, mop hanging limply at his side. What if he reported this? Would he lose his job? The meager income barely kept the lights on and food on the table, but in silence lurked complicity. For a moment, he imagined Emily's bright future, a scientist, changing the world for the better. Would she be proud if he stood by, watching corporate greed dismantle lives? The thought ignited both shame and courage as he quaked with the paradox of his choice. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jack leaned against the edge of the desk, the documents now seeming to shimmer with a life of their own. Which path would define him? Would he remain a faceless presence in a suit of invisibility, cleaning up the messes of those who held power? Or would he dare to confront the titan sat behind closed doors, a man cloaked in accolades but draped in arrogance? Each breath felt heavier. The decision loomed like a storm cloud ready to burst. As the day ticked away, he replayed his conversations with Emily, her dreams, her fresh-eyed determination. Fighting against this system felt like a tiny David against an insurmountable Goliath. But perhaps he could wield his own stone, the gritty resilience born from years of scraping by. The weight of his thoughts pressed down on him as he walked out of the office, the mopped floors reflecting a world overshadowed by wealth and disregard. The CEO's door stood tall and intimidating, an imposing barrier to equity and his own dignity. This was more than just a job. This was a fight for recognition, for value, for the spirit of a father wanting to set the tone for his daughter's future. Jack's mind raced with possibilities, and as footsteps echoed toward him, he felt that moment of reckoning draw closer. The time was now. Whatever lay on the other side could rewrite his story, or end it forever. Jack's heart pounded as he stood in front of the CEO's door, the polished wood towering over him like a silent judge. He could almost hear the murmurs of the boardroom beyond, voices mingled with arrogance and entitlement, unaware that a storm was brewing right outside their sanctuary. As he hesitated, the fallacy of his identity crushed down on him. Was he truly just a janitor? The man who cleaned up after others, invisible and ignored? Or was he more? The document, with its glaring errors, was an indictment of the very system that had relegated him to this role. He took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. The time had come to turn the tide, even if it meant risking everything. Before he could change his mind, Jack reached for the handle, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. With a determined push, the door swung open. The boardroom was an austere cavern filled with sharp suits and sharper minds, all eyes turning to him with surprise etched on their faces. Their elevated conversations abruptly halted. Jack's breath quickened, thoughts colliding in chaos. "Mr. Thompson?" boomed the CEO, a man with slicked-back hair and a smile that radiated contempt. "What brings you here? You should be cleaning, perhaps?" The mocking tone ignited something deep within Jack, that flicker of defiance he'd long thought extinguished. "I found an error in the financial reports," he declared, a hint of steel in his voice that surprised even him. The CEO's eyebrow arched skeptically. "Error? In what capacity do you think you can question the integrity of our financial documents?" "Enough to know that a miscalculation of this magnitude can lead to disaster," Jack replied, summoning all his courage to meet the intense gazes of the board members. "It can ruin lives, including those of hard-working employees who rely on this company staying afloat. We depend on your decisions." A potent silence filled the room, heavy with disbelief and curiosity. Jack felt the weight of their skepticism in the air, but he knew he couldn't back down. "And who would you be then? Just a janitor?" the CFO asked, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Jack's stomach lurched, but he stood his ground, a fire igniting in his chest. "I'm more than just a janitor. I'm a father, a husband. I might be responsible for cleaning the floors, but I also recognize when something is fundamentally wrong. This isn't just business. It's about integrity." Jack turned to face the rest of the board. "You cannot dismiss the implications of these figures. Ignoring them could lead to disaster, and I couldn't stand by and watch that happen." The tension crackled in the space between them, the room divided between a facade of propriety and a rising tide of betrayal. The idea of a janitor exposing monumental flaws rattled their carefully curated world. Jack could see their expressions shifting from disbelief to vulnerability, and in that fleeting moment, he felt a sense of power he hadn't known before. "Prove it," the CEO commanded suddenly, leaning forward in his chair, eyes narrowed in intrigue. "If you're so certain about this, show us. Show all of us what you think is a mistake." Jack's determination surged, crystallizing into a plan as the urgency of the moment consumed him. This was no longer just about the error. It was about reaffirming his sense of self, reclaiming his place not just as a janitor, but as a crucial player in a larger narrative. The whispers of doubt faded away, replaced by a steely resolve. As the gravity of the situation set in, Jack's mind raced with strategies. How would he confront the web of lies? How could he harness this momentum without losing himself in the process? The next move was imperative, and he felt the weight of his choices, not only impacting his career, but his family's future. Jack held the gaze of the CEO, every nerve alight with anticipation. "I will, but you'll need to listen. This isn't over." He stepped back, feeling the electric hum of potential lingering around him. The true battle had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Jack cleared his throat and took a step forward, ready to transform his vulnerability into a weapon. The moment of truth awaited him, one that could either claim him as an ally of integrity or expose him as a fool. Jack paced in the brief silence after he made his declaration, mind racing through calculations and consequences. The challenge hurled at him was a double-edged sword, a noose or a lifeline depending on how he handled it. His heart and mind waged war. Fear gnawed at him, a familiar adversary, while a burgeoning confidence bloomed like a late spring flower, pushing him to prove that he belonged in this room, and perhaps beyond it. His thoughts started back to the report. The numbers, treacherous and misleading, loomed larger in his mind. Jack recalled the late nights he worked after his janitorial shifts, poring over the documents he secretly sifted through in pursuit of knowledge. Numbers began to swirl around him, forming patterns he had nearly missed in the rush of the everyday grind. Now, he could either let that knowledge die on the vine, or harness it to challenge the facade constructed by suits who thought they had all the answers. The attendees remained suspended in their disbelief, and Jack seized the window. "If you want proof, let me take a look at the calculations and run my assessments." His voice was steadier now. He felt himself transforming in real time, ready to embrace a new identity, one that could lead to respect, even power. The CEO raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "Are you suggesting that you want access to our financial systems? What makes you capable?" He leaned back, arms crossed, his demeanor a mix of disdain and curiosity that set Jack's instincts on edge. Instead of faltering under the weight of their judgments, Jack took a breath and let conviction anchor him. "Because I see patterns that can betray the company's integrity. I've spent years in this building. I know the rhythm of operations, and I know mishaps when I see them." The CFO scoffed. "You mean to tell us that a janitor can decipher our complex financial documents better than trained professionals? It's laughable." The laughter from the board echoed, a harsh reminder of the walls Jack had fought through to get here. But Jack stood tall, words crystallizing with newfound clarity. "It might be laughable to you, but think about what's at stake. A company like this can't afford to overlook mistakes. Ignoring risks is what leads to failure." His voice filled the boardroom, cutting through the mockery like a blade. With every challenge, he felt a flicker of pride igniting. Every dismissal from the board fueled his drive even more. They saw only the facade of his janitorial role, yet he carried a depth of understanding they had overlooked. He was, after all, an observant outsider, one who noticed the cracks in their polished exterior. "Very well," the CEO relented, leaning forward. "You want access? Market your case. If you can substantiate your claims, we will entertain your arguments, but if you're wrong, don't expect a friendly exit." Jack nodded, a whirl of emotions flooding him: anticipation, fear, determination. He understood the gamble. They were offering him a chance to prove his worth, but failure loomed like a specter at the edges of his resolve. As he stepped back, readying himself for the impending investigation, Jack's mind whirred with plans. He had a path ahead, but it would be fraught with constraints and skepticism. Returning to his cleaning duties felt different now. His chores were a reminder that he was still, outwardly, the janitor. Yet, with each sweep of the floor and each trash bag he tossed, Jack mulled over the financial needs of the company and the implications of the mistakes he was about to uncover. Every minuscule detail he had gleaned could lead to monumental revelations. The hours ticked by. The deadline loomed. And Jack needed clarity. He would dig deeper, demand access to reports, learn the terminology, expose the underbelly of inaccuracies. He needed to transform his understanding of these figures from mere observation into actionable insight. As the day drew to a close, a hint of fear skittered back into his mind. Could he really pull this off? Jack pushed the thought away as he clenched his fist tighter. This was a test, not just of capabilities, but of character. His future, his family's stability, depended on the answers he would uncover. With the weight of resolution settling on his chest, he set his focus on the task ahead. He would reveal the discrepancies, he would speak truth to power, and in doing so, he might finally transcend the label of janitor and emerge with an identity forged in hard-earned respect. But as the final echo of the boardroom faded behind him, he knew one thing. Embarking on this endeavor would reshape not just his career, but his very existence. The question remained: would he rise to the challenge, or would the very walls he sought to break down crush him instead? The clock was ticking down to the moment of truth. As the fluorescent lights hummed above, a tension settled around Jack like a familiar cloak. The janitorial supply closet, his temporary refuge, began to feel cramped, stifling even. With each sound beyond the door, the looming deadline weighed heavier on his psyche. Jack felt acutely aware of every moment slipping away, each second heightening his resolve but also his apprehension. His mind fractured into overdrive, sorting through potential avenues to uncover the financial discrepancies that had caught his attention. He envisioned the office, the sterile conference room with its metallic furnishings, contrasting sharply with his lived experience. He recalled the rhythm of their conversations, the authoritative tones that masked insecurity, and the fleeting glances that suggested they too feared what lay beneath the surface. Jack shook off the rising doubt and picked up a notepad, the pages blank yet bursting with potential. For years he had been an observer, watching and learning from the shadows. Now, he had to convert that knowledge into actionable data. The access the CEO had granted him, tenuous as it was, felt like a fragile lifeline. It was an opportunity he could not afford to squander. Determined to bolster his understanding, he crafted a plan. He would approach the office systems cautiously, navigate through electronic labyrinths, and issue requests for reports, honing in on the areas where patterns had previously eluded him. Jack knew he wasn't just delving into financial records. He was peeling back layers of deception that could spiral into countless consequences. Every step forward brought with it whispers of resistance from his internal voice, fear of exposure, fear of failure. Who was he to challenge the established order? But in that same breath, he knew the truth. The analysis he had conducted in secret was worth more than a cursory glance. It demanded action. Resoluteness surged through him. He could leverage his experiences, the late nights, the relentless pursuit of knowledge, as a foundation for his next move. He recalled a story his grandmother had told him, about a lone soldier standing against an army. The depths of that soldier's resolve had forged legends. Perhaps his story could become one of defiance and triumph as well. With an iron grip around the notepad, he opened the door, entering the world of polished suits and polished lies. Jack took a deep breath, focusing on his goal. He approached the nearest workstation, a desk littered with printouts and colorful graphs. Cautiously, he began to sift through the materials, noting discrepancies in the data trends he had observed. Customers reported issues that didn't align with internal metrics. Something was off. "Can I help you?" A voice pulled him from his reverie, and he spun to find Beth, the marketing manager, watching him with a perplexed look. Jack hesitated, momentarily caught between sharing his findings and concealing his quest for validity from this semblance of an ally. The fear of exposure danced at the edges of his awareness. "Just exploring some figures," he managed, adopting a casual demeanor. Overanalysis through a veil of nonchalance was part of the charade he'd need to navigate. "Figures, right?" she mused, unconvinced but curious. "Be careful. The higher-ups don't take kindly to outside insights." Her warning hung in the air, the weight of it pressing down on Jack's shoulders. It was a reminder of the toll his audacity could exact. Would he be met with disdain, or would uncovering the mistakes elevate him into a realm of unexpected respect? Apprehension fizzled, replaced with determination. He wouldn't allow fear to stifle his pursuit. Instead, he made a silent vow to dismantle the lies, one well-placed observation at a time. As the hours rolled on, Jack dove deeper. The patterns he sought began to emerge, illuminated by the glaring light of urgency. The moment lingered. Would the risk of his investigation pay off, or would it cascade into an avalanche that crushed him beneath the weight of the titans he now faced? He understood that this was more than a professional determination. It was a harbinger of self-discovery. He faced an unknown threshold where identity and ambition intersected, an apex upon which his future balanced precariously. But the true challenge awaited just around the corner. Hidden behind a metaphorical curtain was an antagonist, lurking in the shadows of corporate governance. Jack could almost feel the cold finger of opposition beckoning him forward. The saga of his transformation had just begun, but would he have the courage to collide head-on with those who mocked the voice of a janitor? As the clock ticked closer to the moment when Jack would unveil what he had discovered, he felt the pulse of fate reverberate through him. A battle was unfolding, one that would reveal not only the truth of the company, but also the essence of who he was destined to become. Would he grasp his destiny, or would he watch it slip like sand through his fingers? Jack leaned against the sleek conference room table, the glow of the morning sun filtering through the tall windows. Outside, the city moved with brisk efficiency, unaware of the tensions building within the company's walls. Here, within this sterile space that had seen too many insincere smiles and hollow victories, Jack's mind raced with an amalgam of dread and anticipation. He felt the weight of the discoveries he was to present, and the potential fallout that could ripple through the organization. As he shuffled through his notes, the hum of the air conditioning morphed into a relentless reminder of time slipping away. Could he trust his findings? The discrepancies he had uncovered felt bigger than mere numbers, each one a thread in a tapestry of dishonesty. Yet beneath his anxiety lay a burgeoning sense of confidence, a realization that he was more than just a janitor aiming for moments that mattered. He was a change agent in a world long resigned to silence. The door creaked open, and in walked David, the CFO, his presence imposing and authoritative. Jack felt an instinctive tightening in his chest. This man, a titan of finance, was the very person affiliated with the inconsistencies Jack was ready to confront. As David settled into his chair, Jack couldn't help but assess him, searching for glimpses of vulnerability behind the confident facade. Would he be the gatekeeper to the truth Jack sought, or the wall that would halt his ambitions in their tracks? "What do you have for me?" David's voice was curt, his gaze steady. Jack fought to maintain eye contact, grappling with the urge to bow his head in submission. There was a time when such authority would have intimidated him into silence. But now, that very challenge lit a fire in his veins. "I've found some anomalies in the financial reports," Jack began, grounding himself in the facts. As he spoke, he observed David's demeanor shift, the CFO's brow furrowing slightly, a sign that he might be listening. "Anomalies?" David echoed, skepticism lacing his tone. "Yes, discrepancies between customer feedback data and internal performance metrics. The figures don't align properly. They suggest significant underlying issues." Jack continued, pushing aside the anticipation of dismissal with fervor. He outlined his findings, his narrative punctuated by the concise points he'd meticulously noted. The more he spoke, the more it felt as if he were gradually peeling away layers of pretense, stripping down to the raw reality hidden beneath the surface. With each number that rolled off his tongue, he felt himself getting stronger. "And who exactly gave you the authority to sift through this information?" David's eyes narrowed, an edged blend of inquiry and veiled threat. "I've had access, and I took the initiative to ensure the data reflects what's really happening," Jack answered, feeling newfound confidence as he fought against the reflex to capitulate. A silence settled between them, thickening the air. Jack could see the calculations racing through David's mind, the weighing of potential repercussions. Would he dismiss Jack's insights as trivial, or acknowledge the risk of ignoring the bubbling unrest within? "I appreciate your initiative," David finally replied, though the tone suggested a begrudging respect rather than full endorsement. Jack sensed that a crack had formed in David's armor, an opportunity for him to push forward. With a steadiness he didn't entirely feel, Jack began to propose an in-depth review of the reports to clarify the discrepancies. He could feel the stakes rise, transforming this encounter from a mere presentation into a personal manifesto, challenging the status quo. David leaned back, fingers steepled, and Jack could almost see the gears turning in his mind. Would he choose to confront the risk of truth and its implications, or retreat to maintain the harmony of ignorance? Jack's heart raced. He had come to this juncture, hovering on the brink of a defining moment. This was the moment to assert not only his findings, but also his identity. Yet, as much as he felt boldness surging with every word, doubt whispered in his ear, urging caution. The potential fallout was immense. What if exposing the truth led to backlash that undermined his unstable footing in the corporate world? Would he sacrifice everything he had worked for in the pursuit of honesty? But as he glanced down at his notes, Jack saw glimpses of the story forming, a tapestry of integrity woven with threads of courage. The time had come to decide. Would he stand against the tide of corporate deception, or fade back into the shadows where comfort resided? This was not just about numbers anymore. It was about who he was becoming. The eyes of those who had previously overlooked him now seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders, but the fire within propelled him onward. "David," Jack ventured, steady but urgent, "we can be better, but we have to confront this together." The words hung in the air as the gravity of the moment settled around them like a thick fog. For the first time, Jack felt the stirrings of true agency within him. As he faced the CFO, anticipation twisted through his gut like a live wire. What would transpire next could redefine not just his career, but the moral boundaries set by those in power. The stakes had never felt higher. Would David embrace the challenge, or would he once more shelter behind the veneer of authority? An answer loomed just beyond the horizon, and Jack strained to catch the first glimmers of clarity in the swirling uncertainty. Jack's pulse quickened as the silence stretched, weighing heavily like the impending storm clouds on the horizon. David surveyed him, his expression unreadable. And for an excruciating moment, Jack wrestled with an unsettling blend of hope and dread. He had opened the door to possibility, yet the room felt more like a cage, one that could suddenly snap shut. "Facing the truth can be a double-edged sword," David finally remarked, leaning forward slightly, his voice low and measured like a tightrope walker's. "Are you prepared for the consequences, Jack? Sometimes ignorance is bliss." Jack swallowed hard. He could sense the subtle power dynamics at play. The seasoned CFO's words carried an almost palpable threat. However, he was also aware that there was strength in vulnerability, an opportunity for growth cloaked within the tension. "If I back down now," Jack thought, "what does that say about me?" The answer was clear. His silence would echo louder than any insight he might reveal. "I understand, David," Jack said, forcing his voice to steady. "But doing nothing is just as dangerous. If we ignore the problems, they'll only fester. I'm willing to bear the risk." "What you call courage, others call naivety," David retorted. A shaky smile flitted across his lips. "But let's say I do entertain this idea of transparency. How do you plan to approach the rest of the board?" The mention of the board sent a jolt of anxiety through Jack. Before today, he couldn't have imagined himself addressing such influential figures. Yet, there he was, holding his ground against the CFO, and that sense of agency was intoxicating. "I propose a detailed presentation," Jack replied, eyes narrowing with resolve. "I can break down the data trends, illustrate the discrepancies, and frame them within the larger context of our business objectives. If we address these issues now, we'll create long-term value." David's brow raised, a mixture of intrigue and wariness. Bold move, and perhaps a bit reckless. "What's your fallback plan if this backfires?" Jack's heart pounded as he pondered the question. But rather than allowing doubt to seep into his resolve, he considered a path forward, one that involved more than just survival in the corporate arena. It was about forging a new identity marked by integrity. "If it backfires, I'll take responsibility," Jack said, a tangible intensity underscoring his words. "But hiding from the truth has already cost us. My mission is clear, to ensure we all share the same vision." David regarded him carefully, a mixture of respect and skepticism in his gaze. "And you think your mission will resonate with a board that thrives on tradition?" Jack weighed the implications. "Yes. It's time for a new perspective. If there's one thing I've learned in my career, it's that true leadership isn't just about making profits. It's about understanding people. It's about the bigger picture." There was a flicker in David's expression, a momentary hesitation that offered Jack a taste of success. It was an opportunity to reach for something greater than himself, a chance to fight not just for his position, but for a culture of accountability within the company. Unexpectedly, David broke into a grin, almost as though he were impressed despite himself. "All right, Jack, I'll back you, but only under one condition. You handle the presentation yourself. You'll face the board alone. The proposition hung in the air, a charged challenge. While it filled Jack with a sense of dread, it also ignited a spark of defiance within him. He was at a crossroads. "I'll do it," Jack affirmed, a surprising conviction taking root in his voice. The stakes were immense, but the chance to carve out his place in this world had never felt clearer. As he stepped back from the table, anticipation swirled within him as he mentally began to prepare. How would he convey the urgency of his findings to people who likely viewed him as an inconsequential player in their grand game? As David prepared to leave the room, the weight of the moment settled in. Every decision pulled at his consciousness, propelling him toward an inevitable confrontation that would define his trajectory. "David," Jack called out, a fresh urgency in his tone. "When the board hears this, I need your support. They'll trust you." "I won't lie for you, Jack," David replied, his expression hardening. Yet there was also a flicker of camaraderie. "You'll need to earn their trust yourself." Jack felt a surge of adrenaline. He was ready for the ultimate test, the moment that would either cement his place in the corporate landscape or send him spiraling into obscurity. But he was no longer the man who had cleaned the floors in this building. He was rising, and with that ascent came the exhilarating promise of discovery. As he prepared to enter the lion's den, his mind raced with tactics and narratives, the stakes only growing higher. Now stood his ultimate challenge, as the board awaited not just performance metrics, but a story that would change everything. Would Jack's revelation prompt a renaissance within the company, or would it serve as the catalyst for his undoing? The answer loomed ahead, and with it, the cutting edge of his fortitude was about to be tested. Jack spent the next few hours pacing his small office, his mind racing through potential scenarios. Each time he envisioned the boardroom, the faces of the directors staring back at him, a knot tightened in his stomach. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the commitment he had made. This was not just a presentation. It was an opportunity to redefine his career, to stand for something larger than himself. He meticulously gathered notes, statistics, and anecdotes, feeling the weight of the data as he sifted through it. The graphs and trends told a story of mismanagement, but Jack realized they also offered a chance for growth, a chance to pivot the company away from the pitfalls of complacency. He had to prepare not just to present the facts, but to inspire action. As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across his office, he paused, staring out the window. A reflection of himself stared back, stubborn and unyielding, yet shadowed by self-doubt. How had he come to this point? His journey from janitor to potential board representative had been fraught with challenges, but every hardship had been a lesson. He had honed his instincts through adversity, and though the stakes were high, he was no stranger to risk. With renewed resolve, Jack sat down and began drafting his presentation. He constructed a narrative arc, one that mapped the company's trajectory alongside its choices. He took care to articulate not just the dangers lurking within the data, but also the possible rewards of confronting them. Each word felt like a call to arms, an appeal for unity among board members, a request for them to envision a future based on transparency and accountability. He began to see this as less of a confrontation and more of a collaborative journey toward improvement. As he finalized his notes, he could feel a sensitivity creeping in, an awareness of the board's entrenched perspectives. They were powerful figures, comfortable in their ways, and he would need to navigate their dominant tendencies with grace. The question lingered. Could his message pierce through their indifference? In that moment of doubt, Jack's earlier conversation with David resurfaced in his mind. The CFO's skepticism felt like a challenge to be transformed into motivation. After all, if he could inspire at least one person in that room to question their beliefs, it would be a step in the right direction. Gathering his materials, he felt a flicker of boldness mingled with fear, an electric pulse that began to sync with his heartbeat. The night wore on, and as he pressed on through the drafts and revisions, he allowed himself glimpses of the man he was becoming, a leader who would advocate for change, armed not solely with numbers, but with a vision. This was a reckoning, not just for the board, but for himself. He no longer aimed to shift the tides with the force of a wave. Instead, he sought to be the incremental current, persistent and unwavering. When the sun rose the following day, the city was painted in shades of gold and crimson. Jack took a moment to absorb the beauty of the dawn, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his mind. He was ready to go to war in the boardroom, not with weapons of anger or resentment, but with the weapons of knowledge and clarity. As he arrived at the office, he took a steadying breath, his heart racing with both anticipation and apprehension. Each step felt storied, a tread along the path of transformation. He was poised on the brink of something profound, and whether the outcome was success or failure, he could no longer shy away from the thrill of confrontation. Jack entered the boardroom, feeling the tension of expectation coiling around him. As he approached the front, he could see the directors exchanging glances, confusion sauntering in with their skepticism. He was here, and today, he would unlock a door that had long been shut. But suddenly, just as he prepared to speak, the door swung open, and in walked an unexpected figure, someone whose presence made Jack's heart drop. The time for courage had arrived, but would he find the strength to confront this latest challenge? Would it derail his mission? Or would it fuel a resolve he hadn't even known he possessed? The figure who entered was none other than Marianne, the long-ago mentor whose absence had left a void in Jack's professional life. Her reputation loomed large. The former VP of strategy had once been indomitable. Now, standing in front of him, her presence offered both comfort and complication. She had fought to instill integrity in a culture that thrived on shortcuts, and her unexpected arrival undercut his confidence. Would her significant influence alter the trajectory of his message? Jack's pulse quickened as he grappled with conflicting thoughts. Her eyes, usually so warm, now assessed him with scrutiny. Had he prepared enough? Would she be a friend or a foe in this pivotal moment? The tension in the room shifted palpably, a new layer weaving through the already thick atmosphere. Clearing his throat, Jack drew the room's attention back to him. Hazy thoughts about self-doubt intermixed with a growing determination sparked a fire inside him. He remembered the foundation Marianne had built for him, a foundation based on accountability and integrity. Instead of faltering, he felt her strength guiding him, pushing him to embrace this moment. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady, though he could feel the tremor of adrenaline coursing through him. "I stand before you today not as a low-level employee, but as a representative of what we can achieve together." He swept his gaze across the directors, noting their varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. He clicked the remote, and the PowerPoint presentation flickered to life, illuminating the stark truths. Statistics leaped from the screen, disturbing trends in profit margins, employee turnover, and customer satisfaction, all tied to decisions made by those in power. Jack's stomach jostled as he detailed each slide, framing the data not just as an indictment, but as a call for radical change. Midway through, he focused on Marianne's enduring legacy, sharing anecdotes about how she had inspired employees to take accountability. "In her time," he said, gesturing towards her, "we focused on building trust and transparency. I believe we need to reclaim that ethos if we're to avoid the pitfalls that linger in these numbers." Yet, as he spoke, Jack caught a flicker of doubt flicker in her eyes. He sensed a storm brewing beneath the surface of her calm demeanor. The longer he spoke, the more he wondered if she was there to validate him or critique his approach. As he presented the solutions, actionable steps that promised a path to renewal, he could feel the scrutiny intensifying. Each suggestion felt like a gamble against the board's rigid dispositions. Would they embrace change, or dismiss his ideas as naive optimism? Jack squared his shoulders, feeling his pulse race faster. "Let's redefine what failure looks like in this organization," he concluded passionately, his words laced with urgency. "If we shy away from accountability, we doom ourselves to mediocrity. If we stand united, fueled by honest assessments and responsible actions, we can lead the company into a thriving future. The choice is ours." Silence enveloped the room, the weight of his words heavy in the air as he stepped back, uncertain but resolute. Would the directors see the value in his vision? Marianne shifted slightly, her gaze piercing into his like an X-ray. He could almost visualize her dissecting his intentions. Then, a single raised hand in the corner of the room broke the stillness. David, the CFO. As he began to speak, Jack's heart raced. The moment of truth beckoned, but David's words would either bolster his mission or threaten to unravel it. What would David say? Would he challenge the proposed changes or ignite a fire within the board that Jack desperately needed? Jack felt as if time stood still as David adjusted his glasses, the anticipation thickening in the air. Each moment dragged out the tension, suffocating him under the weight of expectation. Would this CFO, a man accustomed to the status quo, appreciate the urgency of his vision, or mercilessly dissect his proposals with a cold, calculating logic? "Thank you, Jack," David began, his measured tone not betraying his thoughts. "You've put forth some compelling points." Jack clenched his fists, hoping to harness the wave of hope rising within him. This could be the validation he desperately sought. "But," David continued, the words striking Jack like a drop of ice water, "we need to consider the financial ramifications more deeply." Jack's heart sank. There it was, the inevitable counter. As David outlined the risks inherent in Jack's suggestions, Jack could feel the hope draining out of the room like sand slipping through an hourglass. He observed the board members, their faces a collage of skepticism and resignation. David's focus on the bottom line painted a narrative that echoed his own past fears, a narrative defined by short-sightedness and inertia. Just as Jack began to spiral into a sea of self-doubt, Marianne's gaze caught his again, silently urging him to fight back. "David, I understand the concerns about financial implications," Jack interjected, his voice firmer than he felt. "But what's the cost of inaction? We risk losing not just profits, but our best talent and market trust." The words felt like a lifeline, each syllable thrusting him deeper into the battle he needed to fight. David's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing both respect and challenge. "And how do you propose we shift the culture? Change doesn't happen overnight, nor without cost." Jack inhaled deeply. "True change requires both time and investment. Our employees need to see that accountability yields positive outcomes, not just punitive consequences. Perhaps we start with a pilot initiative, a small team that can lead these changes. If successful, we can build momentum from there." His thoughts flowed, revealing a plan that aligned with Marianne's teachings, hoping to capture her approval even amidst the board's hesitations. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline course through him. This wasn't just a pitch. It was a mission. He could almost hear Marianne's voice echoing in his mind, reminding him of the importance of servant leadership. Real change started at the foundational level, rooted in people's trust and commitment. "Jack, while I commend your enthusiasm," David replied, his tone tempered with caution, "pilot programs often face challenges in scalability. You risk letting everyone down if it doesn't succeed. What metrics will you use? How can we ensure a comprehensive approach without wasting resources?" Jack paused. This was the moment he needed to differentiate himself, not just as a voice for change, but as a strategic thinker. "We would assess employee engagement and performance metrics quarterly, pairing qualitative feedback from team members with quantitative data," he stated, feeling a rush of clarity. "Transparency about outcomes, good and bad, will enable us to adapt quickly and avoid wasting resources." The room's atmosphere began to shift ever so slightly. He noticed David's brow furrow, perhaps contemplating the coherence of his counter-arguments. Encouraged by the interaction, Jack pressed on, sensing an opening. "If we can demonstrate gradual improvements, not just in numbers, but also in morale, I believe we can rally broader support for these initiatives." A few murmurs passed among the directors as Jack felt the stirrings of hope. Behind him, Marianne nodded ever so slightly, her expression unreadable, but definitely more open. As the weight of his proposals hung in the air, Jack realized that this was more than just a presentation. It was his chance to reclaim his professional identity, but the hurdles were still formidable. Then came the moment of realization. Could he withstand the scrutiny while remaining true to his vision? Would they fall into old patterns, or rise to confront the new narrative Jack was crafting? As Daniel readied to address more objections, Jack's mind raced. The stakes had never been higher, and he knew he was going to have to choose between playing it safe or stepping fully into the uncertain realm of bold accountability. He braced himself for the next challenge, the one that could either solidify his place as a transformative leader or plunge him back into the shadows of doubt. But doubt lingered, the call of the status quo strong. Could he break free from its chains? The collective weight of the boardroom seemed to press down on Jack as he faced the next wave of questions. The stakes were perilous, the room rife with skepticism about his optimistic strategy. But inside, Jack felt a wellspring of determination rising, a refusal to retreat. His moment had arrived, and he steeled himself for what lay ahead. David continued. Yes, Jack, enthusiasm is essential, but it's daunting to rely on emotional metrics as a foundation for change. We're in a field where results matter. What can you specifically promise to back your claims with? Jack inhaled sharply, realizing this was the moment to showcase not just his resolve, but also the strategy etched deeply into his plans. What I can promise is a commitment to adapt our corporate culture towards one rooted in integrity and transparency. If we establish benchmarks and hold transparency sessions to share results, we can foster an environment of accountability, he stated, confidently meeting David's gaze. Marianne shifted her stance, visibly interested in this exchange. Her nod encouraged Jack to elaborate more, recognizing that her influence had shaped his professional foundation. By engaging the employees in the process, we ensure they feel ownership over the changes. Metrics will be based not only on profits, but also on employee satisfaction and retention. Imagine a company where leaders do not just dictate, but collaborate, where failures become learning opportunities instead of punishments, he urged, hands gesturing passionately as he transformed from a simple janitor into a visionary leader. The room fell silent as Jack's words lingered. He could see sparks of questioning emerge on some board members' faces. Perhaps they were reconsidering long-held beliefs. But David's skepticism remained etched in the corner of his expression. Words are valuable, Jack, but the reality is different. Do you think the board can move from a profit-centered strategy to a people-centered approach? Will stakeholders allow that? David shot back, still guarded. Look, David, Jack responded, feeling strength from his newfound identity swell. This is about more than just profit. It's about ensuring the sustainability of the business and preserving what we value. Slowly shifting the mindset can set a precedent that inspires trust from both employees and stakeholders. It's the path to innovation, the key to unlocking potential within ourselves. Just then, a voice piped up from the side of the room, an older board member whom Jack hadn't expected to speak. You're proposing quite a shift, Jack. Some may doubt if the willingness is there. And where's your credibility? You are, after all, a janitor. The comment stung momentarily. A pointed reminder of his background sprung almost forcefully from someone entrenched in the status quo. However, rather than retreating, Jack felt the conviction rise, a resolve to transform that perceived weakness into his greatest strength. I was a janitor, yes, Jack said, his voice echoing with authority. But the very reason I stand here today is my experience of seeing this company from the ground up. I've heard the employees' concerns firsthand and witnessed the harsh realities at ground level. I know what needs to change because I understand the context and the people behind it. If we truly want progress, we need to listen to every voice, including the ones who often go unheard. The boardroom fell silent, Jack's call for recognition resonating through every corner. He could see small glimmers of understanding lighting up some expressions, a small circle of allies forming. Jack pressed on. The very culture we create will dictate our successes, he reiterated. If we embrace a collaborative approach that values participation, we will naturally align with stakeholders. Higher productivity will follow as morale surges. Employee ownership must count for something. I believe we can challenge the assumption that profit margins dictate worth. My ambition is to create a foundation that redefines this notion and prioritizes people. Jack felt empowered in that moment, an object of transformation rather than an instrument of status quo. The board buzzed, murmuring softly among themselves. Would they challenge him further, or could he truly be the voice of change? Marianne finally interjected, breaking the mounting tension. Jack's passion is palpable. I believe there's merit in exploring this path. Might we consider a review with a smaller committee before launching any initiatives? Let's analyze potential areas for pilot programs. A dedicated focus could yield results worth considering. Her advocacy sent ripples through the board, awakening a degree of movement. David nodded, his hesitation softening, though the concerns etched on his face still clung tightly. Jack seized this opening. Let's set parameters for evaluation, and more importantly, let's assure all levels of engagement, making sure those who contribute get to reflect on the outcomes. I'm willing to lead that engagement. A glimmer of realization washed over Jack. No longer was he merely advocating for a report. He was forging alliances, steering conversations about integrity and growth, leading from a place of authenticity. As the discussions carried on, a wave of energy ignited around him. Jack's initial anxiety was replaced by a solid resolve, fueled by engagement and commitment. The board was grappling with questions that this janitor had inspired, a dynamic Jackson never anticipated entering. Before he knew it, it culminated into a practical commitment to craft the pilot initiative. David had agreed to review the proposal, and even more importantly, some board members appeared to genuinely share a connection with Jack's vision. As he walked out of the boardroom, a wave of catharsis washed over him, carrying both uncertainty and exhilaration. For the first time in years, Jack felt his purpose aligning with his action. He realized the transformation was not in his role, but in his perspective. No longer was he just a janitor. He had stepped into the realm of possibility and genuine representation. The journey ahead would not be without trials, but Jack now fully recognized his capacity to influence change. For every new step in this evolution, he had to climb, driven by steps illuminated by his unique journey. Jack Thompson had emerged not merely as a name on a staffing list, but as a force of progress, and he knew, without a doubt, that this was just the beginning. Whatever awaited, Jack was equipped and ready to face it. All for his family, his future, and the truth he had firmly chosen to uphold. As the echo of the boardroom faded behind him, a single thought resonated. This is the moment he had fought for. It was a personal victory, the kind that set the stage for all that would follow. He had achieved much, but the greatest transformation lay ahead. You need to subscribe now to witness more stories of personal transformation. This is the moment to show your support for the journey of overcoming challenges. Leave a like now to help us feed the algorithm. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jack's incredible journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support makes all the difference.